How far would you go for love in a time of knights and castles? Could a simple song change a destiny? Do secrets always stay hidden, especially when sung out loud? Get ready to dive into the passionate, daring, and often dangerous world of the 11th to 14th centuries, where poets and musicians held harps in their hands. Number 7. The Song of the Serpent's Kiss. Elara's world was a gilded cage, though it was a cage of silk and silver, nestled in the heart of Aquitaine. She was the only daughter of Baron Armand, a man whose wealth was matched only by his sternness. Elara was destined for a marriage alliance, a political chess piece, in the grand game of medieval power. But her heart, like the wild roses clinging to the castle walls, yearned for something untamed. Into this tightly controlled existence stepped Guilhem, a troubadour from a distant Gascon valley. He was not a knight nor a lord, but a master of words and melody, his voice carrying the scent of freedom and the promise of passionate verse. Guilhem arrived at Baron Armand's court in the spring of 1187. His fame had traveled before him, tales of his lyrical prowess and hauntingly beautiful songs of love and longing. He was invited not as a peer, but as an entertainer, a bright bird to adorn the Baron's feasts. Yet the moment Elara saw him perched on a simple stool in the great hall, his lute cradled like a lover, something shifted within her. His eyes, dark and knowing, met hers across the smoky hall, and a silent conversation began, one that spoke of shared dreams and unspoken yearnings. Guilhem's songs were unlike anything Elara had ever heard. They spoke of Finamers, the pure, refined, courtly love that transcended earthly bonds, a love that was spiritual and intellectual, yet deeply emotional. He sang of ladies whose beauty inspired valor, of knights who served their beloved with unwavering devotion. But when he sang, his gaze invariably found Elara. His voice, clear and resonant, seemed to wrap around her, pulling her into a world where feeling trumped duty. This quiet communication, unnoticed by the bustling court, became their secret language. He was not practicing, but composing, humming new melodies. He looked up startled as she approached. "My lady," he said, bowing low, his voice a soft echo of his singing. Elara did not retreat. "Your song tonight, Guilhem," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "It spoke to me of a love that cannot be openly declared." Guilhem's eyes held hers, and for a moment the world outside their silent understanding ceased to exist. "A love, Lady Elara," he replied, his voice rough with emotion, "that burns brighter for its secrecy like a hidden gem." From that night forward their encounters became clandestine. They met in the castle gardens after dusk by the moonlit fountain, or in a quiet corner of the library amidst forgotten scrolls. Guilhem would teach her the nuances of troubadour poetry, explaining the troubadour clues, the closed or difficult style meant for an initiated few, which he now applied to their own hidden communication. He wrote psalms for her carefully, coded with allusions to their secret meetings, to the color of her gown on a particular day, to the scent of the jasmine in the garden where they met. These songs, while performed for the entire court, were her private messages sung directly to her soul. Other courtiers, caught up in the melodies, rarely noticed the subtle details that revealed their secret. Their love was a dangerous game. The strict social codes of the medieval aristocracy meant such a relationship was unthinkable, especially for a lady of Elara's standing. If discovered, Guilhem faced banishment or worse, the wrath of Baron Armand. Elara faced dishonor, a ruined reputation, and a lightly forced entry into a convent. Yet the risk only fueled the intensity of their connection. It was, as records from the period suggest regarding courtly love, a love intensified by obstacles, a love that purified the lover through suffering and devotion. The 13th century romance, Flamenca, also explores similar themes of a lady's secret passion for a troubadour, showing that such narratives were part of the cultural imagination. As months passed, the secret became a heavy cloak. Elara grew pale, her eyes holding a haunted depth, that her ladies-in-waiting attributed to the strain of her impending betrothal to a distant lord. Guilhem, too, seemed to carry a burden, his songs tinged with a beautiful melancholy that captivated his audiences even more. The court, however, was not entirely blind. A jealous squire, a young man named Raoul, who harbored his own unrequited affection for Elara, began to notice the subtle glances, the way Guilhem's fingers lingered a moment too long, the way her eyes followed him like a moth to a flame. Raoul, driven by spite and a twisted sense of loyalty to the Baron, began to watch. He saw them one moonlit night in the garden, speaking in hushed tones. Their hands almost touched. He did not hear their words, but the intimacy of the scene was enough. He reported his suspicions to Baron Armand. The Baron, a man of rigid principles, was furious. He summoned Guilhem, not to the great hall, but to his private chambers. What happened there was not publicly known, but the troubadour emerged hours later, pale and shaken, his lute conspicuously absent. That same evening, Elara was confined to her chambers, her ladies-in-waiting replaced by stern, watchful guards. The next morning, Guilhem was gone. He had not been banished. Like a melody fading into the wind, Elara from her window watched as his horse, a familiar dappled gray, was led away, its reins held by one of the Baron's men, a symbolic finality to his departure. Elara never saw Guilhem again. She was married a month later to the lord her father had chosen, a powerful but unsmiling man. She lived out her days as a dutiful wife, her public face composed and serene, yet deep within her heart a song continued to play, a haunting melody of what might have been, and sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the castle was still, she swore she could hear a faint strumming of a lute carried on the night wind, a ghost of Guilhem's love, a song forever unsung for the world, but echoing eternally in her private heart. The troubadour tradition, as scholars like Amelia van Vleck have explored, often involved complex relationships between patrons and performers where admiration could cross into personal affection, though rarely with such stark consequences. Their story became a silent ballad, sung only by the whispers of the wind through the cypress trees of Aquitaine. Number 6. The Minstrel's Oath of the Crimson Rose. In the bustling city of Paris during the late 13th century, a different kind of love story unfolded. This was the era of King Philip IV, a time of grand cathedrals rising to the sky and a society buzzing with intellectual and artistic life. Sir Godfrey de Montaigne was a knight of considerable renown, brave in battle and eloquent at court. His wife, Lady Isabelle, was known for her exceptional beauty and her sharp wit, her eyes like emeralds, her laughter like tinkling bells. Into their lives, as a valued member of their household, came Thomas, a young minstrel, skilled in a variety of instruments and possessed of a voice that could both charm and soothe. Thomas was not a troubadour in the southern style, composing intricate verses of courtly love. He was a jongleur, a northern minstrel, a versatile entertainer who could sing epic chansons de geste, perform acrobatic feats, and tell humorous fabliaux. He was an integral part of the household, bringing joy and entertainment to Sir Godfrey's court. He played for their meals, performed at their feasts, and often accompanied Lady Isabelle on her harpsichord during her private musical sessions. It was during these quiet shared moments of melody that a forbidden feeling began to blossom. Thomas had always admired Lady Isabelle, who wouldn't, but as he spent more time in her presence, teaching her new tunes, discussing the structure of popular ballads, he found himself drawn to her intellect, her kindness, and the quiet strength she possessed. He saw beyond her status as a noblewoman and perceived the thoughtful, compassionate woman beneath. His admiration slowly deepened into a profound, aching love, a secret fire that he guarded fiercely within his heart. He knew the impossibility of it. He was a mere minstrel, a commoner, while she was a lady of high birth married to a respected knight. Such a love, if ever discovered, would be a scandal of immense proportions, bringing ruin upon them both. Chronicles from the period, such as those by Jean de Joinville, often detail the rigid social hierarchy of the time, making such an illicit romance exceptionally perilous. Thomas expressed his devotion not in explicit words, but through his art. He began to compose new songs, not the usual light-hearted ditties or heroic tales, but melancholic ballads of unrequited love, of devotion, offered from afar, of a hidden flame that burned. He wove intricate metaphors into his lyrics, a humble rose worshipping the sun, a quiet stream flowing towards a magnificent ocean, a distant star guiding a lonely traveler. These songs were performed for the entire court, but their true meaning was intended for one listener alone, Lady Isabelle. He made sure the melodies were haunting, the lyrics poignant so that they would resonate with her, without ever betraying their true subject. Lady Isabelle, perceptive as she was, noticed the shift in Thomas's repertoire. She felt the weight of his gaze when he sang these particular songs. A gaze filled with a profound sorrow and an undeniable intensity. She recognized the metaphors, though she did not immediately connect them to herself. She simply found herself deeply moved by the raw emotion in his music. She would often comment on their beauty, praising his skill. "Thomas," she would say, her voice soft, "your newest songs touch the very soul. They speak of a devotion I rarely encounter." These words, innocent as they were both a blessing and a torment to Thomas. They affirmed that she heard him, but they also underscored the chasm between them. His love was a crimson rose, beautiful and painful, blooming in the shadows, its thorns a constant reminder of the danger. Concept of pure love, where the lover expected no physical return, as explored in courtly literature, aligns with Thomas's approach. He poured his entire being into his music, making his unspoken love a masterpiece of devotion. One winter evening, a fierce storm raged outside, trapping everyone within the castle walls. Sir Godfrey was away on a diplomatic mission, leaving Lady Isabelle to manage the household. Thomas was performing in the great hall, his music providing a comforting counterpoint to the howling wind. He chose a ballad. He had recently completed one of his most personal and heartbreaking compositions. It spoke of a bird that sang its heart out to a distant star, knowing their paths could never truly intertwine, yet finding solace in the act of devotion itself. As he sang, his voice was rich with controlled emotion, and he looked at Lady Isabelle, who sat by the roaring fire, her embroidery forgotten in her lap, her eyes fixed on him. When the song ended, the hall was silent for a moment, then burst into applause. But Lady Isabelle did not applaud. She rose and walked towards him, her expression unreadable. "Thomas," she said, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire, "that song, it is exquisite. It speaks of a sorrow I understand, though I cannot name its source." Thomas met her gaze, his heart pounding. "It is a sorrow, my lady," he replied, his voice hoarse, "that comes from a love so profound, it can only be offered in silence, from a distance." Lady Isabelle's eyes widened slightly. A flicker of understanding, perhaps even recognition, passed through them. She took a step closer. "And does this bird," she asked, her voice a whisper, "ever hope that its song is truly heard by the star?" Thomas swallowed hard. "It hopes, my lady, that the star knows even without words that its light is the bird's sole purpose." For a long moment they simply stood there, an unspoken truth hanging between them, a fragile, dangerous thing. The firelight flickered across their faces, revealing the raw emotion in Thomas's eyes and a newfound vulnerability in Isabelle's. In that moment the impossible became almost tangible. The quiet understanding was profound, but also perilous. Lady Isabelle, though touched, was a woman of honor, bound by her marriage vows and the expectations of her station. She never encouraged Thomas beyond polite appreciation, nor did she betray her awareness of his true feelings. She simply allowed his music to be a balm, a beautiful, sad acknowledgement of a love that could never be. She saw it as an expression of fin amours, the idealized form of courtly love, where the relationship remained spiritual and unconsummated, a notion that scholars like Maurice Valency have explored as a key aspect of medieval romance. Thomas continued to serve the household faithfully, his songs remaining his only outlet. He knew his love was unrequited in the traditional sense, but he found a quiet satisfaction in her understanding, in the knowledge that his music reached her heart. He accepted his role, his oath to his craft, and his silent devotion, like the humble rose, found its purpose in worshiping its distant sun. This devotion became his life's melody, a beautiful, heartbreaking testament to the power of a minstrel's heart, a love that would endure long after the last note faded. Number 5. The Night of the Nightingale's Heart. In the sun-drenched lands of Provence, around the early 12th century lived Sir Raymond de Vaux, a knight known not only for his prowess with a sword, but also for his exceptional talent as a troubadour. Unlike many troubadours who were of lesser noble birth or commoners, Raymond was a powerful lord, a paradox in a time when poetry was often seen as the domain of traveling entertainers. Yet his passion for verse was as strong as his martial skill. His songs, filled with vivid imagery and profound emotion, were highly regarded even by the famed William IX, Duke of Aquitaine, who is considered the first troubadour. Raymond, however, held a secret devotion, not to a lady of another court, but to a woman named Adeline, a woman of humble origins, yet possessing a spirit as bright as the Provençal sun. Adeline was the daughter of a master weaver in Raymond's own village. She was not of noble blood, had no dowry to speak of, and was certainly not a suitable match for a lord of Raymond's standing. Their paths should have never crossed in a romantic sense. Yet destiny, or perhaps the sheer audacity of love, intervened. Raymond had first seen Adeline when she was a young girl, her fingers deftly working the loom. Humming a folk tune, he was struck by her unpretentious grace, and the natural joy that seemed to radiate from her. As he grew older and his poetic talents blossomed, his admiration for Adeline deepened into an unspoken affection. Their connection began subtly. Raymond, often escaping the stifling formality of his castle, would walk through the village. He would stop by Adeline's father's workshop, ostensibly to discuss the quality of the fabrics, but his eyes would always seek out Adeline. He learned to appreciate her quiet strength, her practical wisdom, and her innate kindness. He found himself composing verses not about idealized noble ladies, but about the simple beauty of a village girl, the warmth of the sun on her hair, the sincerity in her laughter. These songs were different from his courtly cansos. They were more grounded, more personal, filled with a tender realism. One warm summer evening, Raymond found Adeline by the river, washing clothes. He approached her, not as a lord, but as a man drawn by an irresistible force. He did not immediately speak, but took out his small, portable lute and began to play a tune, a simple, poignant melody he had composed for her. The song spoke of a knight who found his true heart not in a grand castle, but in the humble dwelling of a village maiden, a love that defied all societal expectations. It was a pastorela of sorts, a genre of troubadour poetry that often depicted interactions between knights and shepherdesses or village girls, though Raymond's version was far more heartfelt. Adeline listened, her hands still in the cool water, her gaze fixed on him. When he finished, the only sound was the gentle lapping of the river. "My Lord Raymond," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Your music. It speaks a truth that many dare not whisper." Raymond put down his lute. "And what truth is that, Adeline?" He asked, his voice low. "That love does not heed rank or title," she replied, her gaze meeting his, "but only the heart." In that moment, their unspoken understanding became a shared secret. They began to meet discreetly away from prying eyes. They would walk through the fields at dusk, beneath the olive trees, or by the river at dawn. Raymond shared his poetry with her, not the versions polished for court, but the raw and nascent lines that sprang from his deepest feelings. Adeline, in turn, shared her world, her insights into the rhythms of nature, the strength of simple folk, the beauty of everyday life. She became his muse, not in the distant, unattainable way of courtly love, but as an active, beloved partner in a shared reality. Their love was a quiet rebellion. Raymond knew the severe consequences if their relationship became known. A lord taking a commoner as a mistress was one thing, but to truly love her, to wish to elevate her, was an affront to the feudal system. His family would disinherit him, his peers would scorn him, and his reputation would be ruined. Yet he could not deny his heart. His songs became his way of declaring his love, subtly, cleverly, weaving it into the fabric of his performances for the court, where others might hear the beautiful words, but not grasp their true revolutionary meaning. He used senhal, a coded name for Adeline, in his verses, often calling her nightingale or my true dawn, a common practice among troubadours to protect the identity of their beloved. As time passed, their bond deepened. Adeline, despite her humble background, possessed an inner nobility that Raymond admired above all else. She understood his artistic soul, something few of his noble peers truly grasped. She encouraged his music, his poetry, and saw him not just as a powerful lord, but as the man who played sweet melodies. Just for her, their secret, like all secrets, eventually faced scrutiny. Rumors, whispered by envious ladies and gossiping servants, began to circulate in Raymond's court. His mother, a formidable woman keenly aware of the family's standing, took notice of his frequent, unexplained absences and the changed tone of his songs. She confronted him. "Raymond," she said, her voice cold as winter, "your heart strays from your duty. A lord does not find his happiness in a weaver's shack." Raymond, for the first time, openly defied her. "My happiness, mother," he stated, his voice firm, "is found where truth and love reside, and that is with Adeline." His mother was appalled. The family's honor was paramount, she demanded. He and the liaison threatening to disinherit him, to publicly shame Adeline and her family. The pressure was immense. Raymond, a knight, sworn to duty, was torn between his love and his obligations. In a move that shocked his court and his family, Raymond did not end the relationship. Instead, he made a daring decision. He could not marry Adeline and retain his title and lands, but he could choose a life with her, free from the constraints of his noble status. He abdicated his lordship, transferring his lands and title to a younger, more compliant cousin. He kept only a small, remote estate, far from the grand court, and a modest income enough to live a simple, honest life. This kind of renunciation was almost unheard of for a lord of his standing, demonstrating the profound depth of his love. He then went to Adeline, not in grand attire, but dressed simply like a man of the people. "Adeline," he said, holding out his hand, "I have chosen a life where my heart can sing truly. Will you share it with me as my wife, not by grand ceremony, but by the true bond of our souls?" Adeline, touched beyond words by his sacrifice, placed her hand in his. They were married in a quiet ceremony by a village priest, away from the judgmental eyes of the aristocracy. Raymond DeVos, a troubadour knight, became Raymond, the devoted husband and modest landholder. Continued to compose, but his songs were now for Adeline alone, sung by the hearth, celebrating their quiet, enduring love. Their story became a legend in the region, a testament to a love that dared to challenge the rigid structures of the medieval world, proving that true nobility resided not in bloodline or title, but in the heart, as so many troubadour poems had argued. Number 4. The Whisper of the Minnesänger Secret. In the cold, misty forests of medieval Germany, during the early 13th century, a different form of lyrical love bloomed. Here, the minnesänger, akin to the troubadours of the south, composed their songs of minne or courtly love. One such minnesänger was Wolfram, a poet of renown whose verses were known for their profound spiritual depth and their vivid descriptions of chivalry and unwavering devotion. Wolfram was often invited to the grand courts of the Holy Roman Empire, his most frequent patron being the powerful Duke Leopold VI of Austria. It was at Duke Leopold's court in Vienna that Wolfram encountered the Lady Eleonora, the Duke's sister. A woman of extraordinary grace and a quiet, contemplative nature, Eleonora was a scholar, a rarity for women of her time. She spent her days poring over illuminated manuscripts, her mind alight with tales of ancient heroes and the wisdom of philosophers. She was not a beauty of the flamboyant sort, but her intelligence and gentle spirit made her deeply captivating. Wolfram, a man whose mind was as keen as his poetic eye, was drawn to her, not just for her elegance, but for her profound intellect, a trait he found mirrored in his own complex verses. Wolfram's minnesang was different from the often playful or overtly passionate songs of the troubadours. His work, like his epic Parzival, explored themes of spiritual quest, inner purity, and a love that was not merely earthly desire, but a path to higher understanding. When he sang for Eleonora, his voice was often tinged with a solemn reverence, a recognition of her inner light. He dedicated a series of his new likes, or lyrical suites, to an unnamed lady of profound wisdom and inner beauty. Everyone at court assumed he was singing to some distant idealized princess, a common trope in minnesang, as scholars like Olive Sayce point out. They never suspected the true object of his profound admiration. Eleonora, however, recognized herself in his verses. She recognized the quiet allusions to the books she read, the subtle references to her philosophical musings, the precise way he described her thoughtful silences. She saw that Wolfram's understanding of her went beyond superficial observation. He perceived her true self, the self she rarely revealed to the bustling court. Their connection was intellectual before it was emotional. A meeting of two sharp, kindred minds. They began to seek each other out for conversations, ostensibly to discuss literature or philosophy. They spoke of the epics of antiquity, the allegories of the church, the intricacies of the German language. In these discussions, a deep respect blossomed into an unspoken affection. Wolfram's songs became his private diary for Eleonora, each verse a coded confession of his growing love. He sang of a hidden spring whose waters nourished his soul, a star of intellect that guided his poetic journey. These were not the passionate declarations of forbidden love, but quiet, reverent expressions of profound admiration, a love of the mind and spirit. Their secret was not one of scandalous trysts, but of a shared intellectual intimacy that transcended the social norms. It was a love that lived in the realm of ideas and poetry, a quiet understanding between two souls. Duke Leopold, absorbed in matters of state and war, saw nothing amiss. He simply valued Wolfram as a brilliant poet and Eleonora as his learned sister. He encouraged their discussions, believing they enriched his court's cultural life. However, a young courtier, a visiting knight from Bavaria named Sir Ulrich, also harbored a deep, unrequited admiration for Eleonora. Ulrich was a man of action, not of letters, and he resented the intellectual bond Eleonora shared with Wolfram. He saw the way Eleonora's eyes lit up when Wolfram spoke, the quiet smiles they exchanged over a shared line of verse. He interpreted this intellectual intimacy as a dangerous emotional connection, a threat to Eleonora's honor, and by extension the Duke's. He had heard the rumors of illicit affairs involving troubadours in the south, and he feared Wolfram the minnesänger was similarly seducing Eleonora, albeit with words instead of overt actions. Ulrich, fueled by jealousy and a misguided sense of chivalry, began to subtly discredit Wolfram. He spread whispers that Wolfram's songs were too complex, too obscure, hinting that they hid subversive messages. He tried to draw attention to Wolfram's intense gaze upon Elara during performances, trying to imply an impropriety. He even challenged Wolfram to a formal poetic duel, a Sängerkrieg, in the presence of the Duke, hoping to expose some flaw in Wolfram's character or art. Such poetic contests were not uncommon in medieval courts, serving as both entertainment and a display of intellectual prowess, as historical accounts sometimes illustrate. Wolfram, a man of integrity, accepted the challenge, not to engage in a petty quarrel, but to defend the purity of his art, and by extension the integrity of his relationship with Elara. The contest was set, a formal debate in verse, before the entire court, on the nature of true love. Ulrich sang of a love that was bold and physical, a love expressed through martial prowess and overt devotion. Wolfram, in contrast, sang of a love that was pure and spiritual, a love that uplifted the soul and inspired wisdom, a love that transcended worldly desires. He wove lines that only Elara could truly understand, celebrating the quiet strength of intellect and the beauty of a shared philosophical journey. As Wolfram sang, his eyes as always sought out Elara. His words were a powerful and public affirmation of his spiritual connection to her, though subtly veiled enough for the general court to interpret as mere poetic idealism. Elara listened, her heart swelling with a quiet understanding and appreciation. She saw his courage, not just in facing Ulrich, but in publicly defending the kind of love they shared. The Duke, a practical man, found Ulrich's verses too simple and boastful. He was deeply moved by Wolfram's profound and eloquent defense of a more noble, refined love. He declared Wolfram the clear victor, praising his artistry and the depth of his thought. Ulrich, humiliated, left the court shortly thereafter, his schemes thwarted. The victory did not change Wolfram's status, nor did it openly declare his love for Elara. It simply confirmed that their unique connection, rooted in intellect and spiritual appreciation, was understood and valued by them both. Even if the world around them only heard a beautiful song, Wolfram continued to sing his minnesang, and Elara continued to find solace and inspiration in his verses. Their love remained a quiet whisper, a secret cherished in the heart, a testament to a connection that ran deeper than societal expectations, a love that was pure, intellectual, and enduring, hidden in plain sight, like the wisdom within a treasured book. Number 3. The Ballad of the Midnight Rendezvous. The year is 1145 in the rugged yet surprisingly cultured lands of Brittany. Lady Isabelle de Saint-Malo was a woman of fiery spirit, independent and strong-willed. A stark contrast to the demure expectations of noble ladies of her time. Her father, a proud Breton lord, was determined to marry her to a powerful Norman baron, a union that would solidify their family's position. Isolde, however, yearned for a different kind of life, one less constrained by duty and more aligned with the passionate tales she secretly devoured in her chamber. Into her life, during a winter feast, arrived a traveling minstrel named Ronan. He was not a troubadour from the refined courts of Aquitania, nor a minnesanger from Germany. Ronan was a Breton bard, a storyteller and musician, whose craft was deeply rooted in the ancient Celtic traditions of his homeland. His songs were often haunting, filled with tales of magic, ancient heroes, and tragic lovers, accompanied by the soulful strumming of his crwth, a type of stringed instrument. He captivated the court with his raw emotion and storytelling prowess. Isolde was immediately drawn to Ronan. Unlike the stiff formal knights who frequented her father's court, Ronan possessed a wild, untamed spirit, a fierce loyalty to his art and his heritage. He spoke of ancient legends with a passionate reverence, and his eyes, as green as the Breton sea, held a depth she found irresistible. He was different. He saw her, not just as a noble lady, but as a kindred spirit, someone who understood the longing for freedom that resonated within her own heart. He saw the spark in her eyes that yearned for adventure beyond the castle walls. He began to compose new ballads, stories of lovers who defied fate, of men and women who risked everything for a chance at true happiness. These were not the abstract, idealized, courtly love songs, but narrative ballads, vibrant with emotion and often hinting at perilous journeys and secret meetings. He sang of a lady of the sea, whose spirit was as fierce and unbound as the ocean, and whose heart beat only for a traveler of the wild winds. He used the traditional Breton Guerts form for these songs, which often told tragic or dramatic stories, subtly twisting them to reflect his own forbidden desires. Their connection deepened during these performances. Isolde would listen intently, her gaze fixed on Ronan, absorbing every word, every note. She knew these songs were for her, and she felt a powerful pull towards the wildness he represented. Ronan would often subtly alter a line or hold her gaze for an extra second, a silent communication passing between them, a shared understanding of the dangerous path they were treading. Their meeting soon moved beyond the public eye, encouraged by the secret passion igniting within her. Isolde began to slip out of her chambers after midnight. Ronan would be waiting in a hidden corner of the castle grounds, or by the ancient standing stones on the nearby moor. His CRWTH, his only companion. They would speak for hours, sharing their dreams, their fears, and their growing love. Ronan would sing her new songs, raw and unpolished, born directly from his heart. Isolde would confide in him her dread of the impending marriage, her desire to escape the suffocating expectations of her noble birth. Their love was daring, fueled by the thrill of danger and the desperate longing for freedom. They knew that discovery would mean certain ruin for Ronan, and a likely forced entry into a convent for Isolde, or a swift, unforgiving marriage to her chosen baron. Yet they could not stop. The passion between them was too strong. This period saw many such instances of defiance, as demonstrated by the narratives in Lays by Marie de France, which often featured secret lovers and forbidden unions, reflecting a societal fascination with illicit romance. One moonlit night, as they met by the windswept coastal cliffs, a decision was made. Isolde could not face a life without Ronan, a life bound to a man she did not love. Ronan could not bear to see her confined. They would run away. It was a desperate plan fraught with peril. They would travel south to the lands where troubadours were celebrated, where a minstrel and his muse might find a place to truly belong. They would use the old smuggler's path, known only to a few, to reach the coast and board a ship. The escape was set for the night of the full moon, 2 weeks hence. Ronan spent the intervening time composing the Ballad of the Midnight Rendezvous, a song filled with hope and trepidation, describing a journey into the unknown for the sake of love. Performed it at court, his voice brimming with a bittersweet anticipation that only Isolde could truly decipher, but their secret was not as well guarded as they believed. A stable boy, who had also fallen for Isolde's beauty and resented Ronan's easy charm, noticed Ronan's unusual movements around the castle at night. He saw Isolde's light in her window flicker on and off at odd hours. Driven by jealousy, he reported his suspicions to Isolde's father. On the night of their planned escape, as Isolde slipped out of her chamber, she found not Ronan, but her father's guards waiting for her. Ronan, who had been waiting by the prearranged meeting spot on the cliffs, saw the commotion from a distance, saw the guards leading Isolde back into the castle. He knew his love was lost. He knew it would be a futile, suicidal act. Instead, he played his CRWTH, a mournful, heart-wrenching melody carried on the wind, a lament for a love that had dared to defy fate. He watched until the last torch disappeared, then turned and fled, not towards the ship, but into the deep, dark forests of Brittany. A hunted man, Isolde was immediately married to the Norman baron. A joyless affair. She never saw Ronan again, nor did she ever hear his music. Sometimes, when the wind howled around the castle walls, she would swear she heard the faint, mournful strains of a CRWT. Ronan, it was said, became a wanderer, a solitary figure, who sang his tragic ballads of forbidden love across the wild lands of Brittany, his heart forever bound to the Lady of the Sea he had lost. His songs, though never publicly attributed to her, carried the weight of a love that defied the confines of their era, becoming a testament to the enduring power of a passionate, albeit unfulfilled, desire. Number 2. The troubadour's unseen devotion. In the early 13th century, in the bustling city of Barcelona, at the court of King Peter II of Aragon, lived a troubadour named Pere. Pere was not a flashy performer, nor was he famed for great political verses. His strength lay in his lyrical subtlety, his ability to craft verses of tender emotion and profound sensitivity. He was a master of the tenso, a poetic debate, and the partimen, a discussion in verse. But his true genius lay in his canzo, his love songs. Pere's life took a dramatic turn when a young Queen Maria, a woman of gentle beauty and deep piety, arrived at the court as King Peter's wife. Queen Maria was a woman of quiet dignity, often overshadowed by the boisterous court and her husband's active involvement in military campaigns. She was a patron of the arts, but preferred quiet contemplation to grand festivities. Pere was drawn to her gentle nature, her compassionate spirit, and the serene grace she carried even amidst the clamor of the court. His admiration for her grew into a deep, unwavering devotion, a love so pure and unattainable that it took on an almost spiritual quality. Pere knew his place. He was a troubadour, a professional poet, a man of humble origins compared to the queen. He was a servant to the court, not a potential suitor for its highest lady. His love for Maria was an example of fin amours in its most refined form, a love that sought no physical reciprocation but found its fulfillment in the act of devotion itself. This concept, often idealized in troubadour poetry, was a complex one, as scholars like F.X. Newman have examined, emphasizing the ennobling effect of serving a beloved lady. He began to compose songs that were veiled declarations of his adoration. He did not use direct address, but rather spoke of an exalted lady, a guiding star, or a fairest rose, whose virtue and beauty inspired his every verse. He would sing these songs during courtly gatherings, his voice filled with a profound reverence that, while ostensibly for the queen was subtle enough to be interpreted as a general ode to feminine beauty and goodness, a common theme in troubadour poetry. He used the tornada, the concluding stanza of a poem, to address his senhal, or secret name, for her. Often something like, "My true light," or "Lady of Purity," known only to himself and, hopefully, to her. Queen Maria, though generally reserved, found solace in Pere's music. His songs had a calming effect, a gentle melody that resonated with her quiet spirit. She often requested his performances, finding comfort in the beauty of his words. She appreciated his respectful demeanor and the genuine artistry he displayed. She often complimented his work, saying, "Your songs, Pere, speak of a goodness and purity that lifts the soul. You are a truly blessed poet." These words to Pere were more precious than any worldly treasure. They confirmed that she heard him, that his message of devotion, however veiled, reached her heart. He never pressed for more, never sought a private meeting, never broke the unspoken boundaries of their relationship. His love was like a hidden well, nourishing him from within a silent vow he made to himself and to her. The other courtiers were generally oblivious to the true depth of Pere's feelings. They saw him as a gifted performer, admired by the queen. They believed his songs were simply part of his professional repertoire, and that his devotion was merely the conventional homage expected of a troubadour towards his royal patron. The strict adherence to social hierarchy meant that the idea of a troubadour genuinely falling in love with a queen was largely unthinkable, a dangerous folly. This perception provided Pere with a cloak of invisibility for his true emotions. Years passed. Pere continued to serve the court, his presence a quiet constant. Queen Maria, despite the trials of her royal life and the demands of court, always found a moment to acknowledge Pere's latest work, to offer a kind word. Their connection remained entirely within the realm of art and respect, a beautiful, unspoken exchange between artist and muse, patron and performer. In 1213, King Peter II tragically died in battle at the Battle of Muret, a pivotal moment in the Albigensian Crusade. Queen Maria, heartbroken, soon followed him in death, her spirit unable to bear the weight of her grief. The court plunged into mourning. Père was devastated. His muse, his unspoken beloved, was gone. He did not make a public show of his grief. His sorrow was a private, profound ocean within him. For a time he could not compose. The well of his inspiration seemed to have run dry. Months later, as the court slowly began to recover from its sorrow, Père almost instinctively picked up his lute. He began to compose again, but these new songs were different. They were no longer veiled declarations of love for an exalted lady. They were poignant laments for a lost spirit. Elegies of profound grief, yet filled with an endearing hope, speaking of a love that transcended death itself. He spoke of a star that had set, yet shone brighter in memory, and a rose that had faded, but whose scent lingered eternally. These were his eulogies to Queen Maria, sung for the world to hear, but understood by no one as truly the outpouring of a lover's heart. He sang these songs to the young King James I, Maria's son, who remembered Père from his childhood. The young king was moved by the sheer artistry and profound emotion in Père's new compositions. He found comfort in the songs, recognizing the sincere grief for his mother, though never understanding the personal depth of the troubadour's sorrow. Père continued to serve the court for many more years, a living testament to a love that remained unseen, unheard, and unrequited in the earthly sense, yet sustained him through a lifetime of quiet devotion. His songs became his legacy, his silent tribute to Queen Maria. They were the truest expression of fin-namers, a love that endured beyond life, a testament to the enduring power of a troubadour's unseen, unwavering devotion, and a perfect example of how art can be both a public performance and a private confession. As scholars of medieval literature often attest, the troubadour's art was a complex interplay between societal expectation and personal expression. Number 1. The troubadour who found his own song. In the vibrant, sometimes chaotic world of the late 12th century, where the Crusades were drawing men eastward and new ideas were stirring, there lived a troubadour named Arnaud. He was from a small, unremarkable village in Limousin, but his ambition was anything but small. Arnaud was a master of troubadour clouse, the closed or difficult style of poetry known for its intricate rhymes, complex metaphors, and demanding linguistic puzzles. He believed that true art should be exclusive, understood only by the most discerning and intelligent audiences. He yearned for fame, for recognition in the grandest courts, and for the patronage of the most powerful lords. He was a man driven by ambition, and his psalms, while technically brilliant, often lacked the raw, emotional core that truly moved hearts. Arnaud's quest for renown led him to the court of Countess Beatrix in Auvergne. Beatrix was a woman of formidable intellect and a discerning patron of the arts. She enjoyed the intellectual challenge of troubadour class, but she also valued genuine feeling. She had a reputation for cutting through pretense, for recognizing true talent over mere technical showmanship. Arnaud arrived at her court with a retinue of eager squires and a chest full of his most complex, impenetrable verses, performed for Beatrix, his delivery precise, his voice is a dazzling display of linguistic dexterity. He expected immediate adulation. Beatrix listened patiently, her expression unreadable. "Master Arnaud," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "your skill is undeniable. Your verses are like a finely woven tapestry, intricate and beautiful. But a tapestry, however lovely, does not bleed. Where is the heart in your song?" No one had ever challenged his art in such a direct, personal way. He tried to defend his style, explaining the intellectual purity of troubadour class. Beatrix merely nodded. Purity of intellect, yes, she conceded. But where is the passion, the vulnerability, the amour that stirs the soul, not just the mind? She then introduced him to her own courtly minstrel, a young woman named Lyra. Lyra was not a troubadour in the same vein as Arnaut. She was a jokelaressa, a female minstrel, and her art was simpler, more direct. She sang folk songs, ballads of common people, and new compositions that, while less complex than Arnaut's, resonated with a raw, undeniable emotion. She accompanied herself on a small, unadorned harp, and her voice, though not as technically trained as Arnaut's, possessed a haunting clarity and a profound sincerity. Records from the period, while not abundant to indicate the existence of female performers like the jokelaressas, who often had a different, more accessible style than the male troubadours. Beatrix tasked Lyra with assisting Arnaut, with helping him find the heart in his songs. Arnaut was initially annoyed. He, a master of troubadour cluse, to be taught by a mere jokelaressa. It was an insult to his craft, yet Beatrix's patronage was too valuable to dismiss reluctantly. Arnaut began to work with Lyra. He would present his intricate verses, and Lyra would listen, her head tilted, her brow furrowed. "It is beautiful, Arnaut," she would say. "But what did you feel when you wrote this line? What memory, what longing inspired this metaphor?" She challenged him to strip away the intellectual layers to expose the raw emotion beneath. She introduced him to the power of simple, evocative language, the impact of a direct, heartfelt declaration. Arnaut at first resisted. He argued about poetic structure, about the importance of intellectual engagement, but Lyra's quiet persistence, her undeniable sincerity, and the sheer emotional power of her own songs began to chip away at his defenses. He found himself drawn to her not just as a mentor, but as a person. She saw past his ambition and his carefully constructed artistic persona to the man beneath, a man who, like all others, felt love, longing, and fear. Their working relationship slowly blossomed into something more profound. Arnaut found himself falling in love with Lyra, with her authenticity, her gentle wisdom, and her unwavering belief in the power of true emotion. This love was unlike the courtly ideal he had previously sung about. It was real, tangible, and wonderfully messy. It was a love that didn't hide behind complex metaphors, but laid itself bare. His poetry began to change. He still retained his technical mastery, but his new verses were imbued with a warmth, a vulnerability, and a directness that had been absent before. He began to write troubadour, the light or accessible style which focused on clarity and emotional impact, a style he had previously dismissed as too simple. He wrote songs for Lyra, not with coded sen-halls, but with a transparent devotion, praising her, not just as a muse, but as his teacher, his love, his heart. He sang of a truth found in a simple voice, and a heart that learned to sing from another's melody. His performances at court changed too. The audiences were no longer merely impressed by his skill, they were moved by his sincerity. They felt the genuine emotion resonating in his voice. Even Countess Beatrix, who had initially challenged him, noticed the transformation. "Arnaut," she remarked, after one such performance, a genuine smile on her face, "your tapestry now bleeds. It has found its heart." The other troubadours, initially confused by his change in style, eventually recognized the profound improvement in his art. He was no longer just technically brilliant, he was emotionally resonant. He became a more complete artist, respected not just for his mind, but for his soul. Arnaut and Lyra, unlike many forbidden lovers, did not face tragic ends. Their love was open, honest, and accepted. Countess Beatrix, a woman of progressive views, saw the beauty in their connection and continued to patronize them both. They continued to perform together, their voices and instruments weaving a harmonious tapestry of their shared life and art. Arnaut, the master of troubadour, cluse, ultimately found his true voice in the simplicity of love. He learned that the deepest truths were not always hidden in complex verses, but often lay in the raw, unadorned emotion of a simple song. A song born from a heart that had finally learned to truly feel and express itself. Their story, while not recorded in grand chronicles, became a whispered legend among the performers, a testament to the troubadour, who through love found his own true song, could be transformed by the pure, unvarnished power of genuine affection